Okay, we're on.
Welcome to our media briefing, and we welcome those who are watching us over the internet and invite you to send some questions in today. This is the 43rd day of the legislature. We adjourn sine die on Thursday night at midnight. A few big issues still in the works: gasoline tax, anti-discrimination. So we're working through those issues. I think we'll have a resolve to most of those by midnight on Thursday. We'll open it up to questions from the media.
The House, it looks like, is not sending over Utah Cares. And you guys
Permanently?
It says House held, so I mean, you
don't
tell me.
know.
Have you what
I
have you
don't
guys
know.
been told?
We're just waiting for it to come over. We just thought it was maybe part of the sifting process and prioritization process that we all have. So maybe that's still the issue.
I understand that EAC is being canceled again. You've got the hole in the budget to deal with, either Healthy Utah or Utah Cares. You can't really settle the bill of bills until you know what, if anything, you need to do there, right?
I don't think we're pausing our budget process for what we do with Medicaid expansion. Just understanding the politics of that issue right now, we're moving ahead with the budget. We'll be moving ahead with the bill of bills. If we're able to come together with some kind of an agreement, we can always amend it at some point or run a new bill. There's a lot of those possibilities, but Senator Hillier, you're not slowing up for Medicaid expansion of...
It's an interesting challenge, Lisa, because if Healthy Utah passes, we've got to come up with $25 million one time to cover a 2-year challenge.
In fact, though, it's a negative fiscal
right.
note for the first year, so we wouldn't have to do anything.
Yeah. The Healthy or Utah Cares, I understand, has a $25 million ongoing fiscal note, and we've not funded it, so we'll have to find funding to do that.
How do you find that kind of money, though, if the bill of bills takes care of the funds you have available, which it almost always does?
We can always go back into the bill of bills and reallocate monies within the budget. So even though we've done a budget one way, the final bill that passes is what really does it. Secondly, we could look at other kind of sources of revenue. There's some that are, like I said, it doesn't get very pretty. And you start looking at where you find that money in Health and Human Services, where that is. That's a big budget, and we may have to find there. I really don't know. I'll worry about that if that happens.
It sounds like, President, you don't think that it will happen at this point. And
With the boys?
Given the politics, that maybe there's no reason to worry about the impact on the budget.
I would like to continue to be optimistic, and because we still have 2.5 days, but there's a lot of what should I call? We've got to climb a pretty steep mountain to come to an agreement.
I understand you met with the speaker last night on this issue. Any progress there?
Well, we talked about a lot of issues. We're really not talking too much about Healthy Utah or Utah Cares at this point. We talked a lot about budget issues. We did mention some discussion about that, but it was just very superficial. We're not talking negotiating or anything on. We didn't do that last night in our meeting.
Why not, given how close the deadline is for action on this? Are you just in a position where neither of you can move? And
yeah, we've got to get the governor and speaker and me together probably to make that happen. And it's a heavy climb at this point, and so we have other issues that we need to address, and we're spending most of our time on those issues right now.
What are those issues that you worked with the speaker through last night?
We're working on gasoline tax. We're working on just other budget issues, some of the sand issues, some insignificant issues. Talking about the anti-discrimination, religious liberties, bills. Just we're talking about process, how they'll work through both houses. And
On gas tax, are there sticking points over here? I've heard maybe the Senate doesn't like the 1/4 sales tax increase that the House version has.
well, it's not our favorite thing, but we're in. It's hard for me to even talk about the local option because we haven't had a discussion about that in caucus, and we probably won't for the next couple of days. We've had a lot of extensive discussion about the gas tax. I shouldn't say a couple of days. We'll probably talk about it tomorrow or Thursday when we have to address the bill.
Do you think you're gonna reach a compromise on the gas tax?
I'm very optimistic about that.
Are
So,
you close? Are you close now, do you think, to compromise?
Reasonably close. Senator Adams has actually been negotiating, helping us with those negotiations. How close do you think we are on a gas compromise?
I didn't hear what gas tax?
Yes.
What's that?
It's coming along, I think. It's not there yet, so there's positive movement. I think everyone understands the need. There's no question about it that because there's no inflationary element in gas tax, there needs to be something done. And so I'm optimistic, and we'll just see what happens.
I understand though that there had been some kind of an agreement on the Senate accepting the formula, the House accepted the formula being adjusted to raise the tax 5 cents, but I'm hearing now that there was an agreement on that local option portion. That may be the sticking point over here.
I don't think we've talked local option at all over here, have we?
No. I can't say it's a sticking point, because we have to look at the whole package.
I don't know. We have, obviously, Senator Van Tassel, is he here? He's got the gas tax increase bill, and I think we've basically, his, I think, was 10 cents, and I think he's working through that process. So as far as the gas tax increase, we're pretty much on record trying to move that forward.
You think you're gonna make the deadline? Is it gonna happen?
Yeah, I think we'll probably do something, I hope, anyway. I mean, if we got lots of time left, don't we?
And the revenues from that would just be more for roads then, right?
Pardon me?
Any additional revenues if you...
Maintenance and bridges.
Yeah, it's P&C and transportation fund, which is pretty much used for maintenance.
Senator Maine? Would you like to
Hello.
weigh in on the gas tax?
Well, I'm a builder, and we will have something. I know we will with my colleagues. We need money to support roads. We need to build roads, and we need to maintain roads. And I think the citizens know that. It's whatever product we have, but we have to have a product. We need to fix the roads. We need to take care of maintenance. If we are an economic engine, we need to make transportation one of our #1 priorities.
More generally speaking, it seems like every year there's kind of this friction between the Senate and the House over one issue or a few issues. This year there are a couple issues. Where does that come from? I mean, the supermajority is Republicans in both houses. You all kind of want the same thing, but where does that friction come from?
I know I get that all the time, that question, and you think that I have colleagues across the country, Senate presidents, that I have communication with and develop relationships with, where they have, a closer, there's more even Democrats and Republicans, and where one body is Democrat and one body is Republican. We get a lot more done, granted, than those folks, but it isn't easy here just because of the natural tension that exists between the governor, the House, the Senate. It was established that way, that there would be some natural tension, so that if one body would try to be a check and a balance on the other body. And it's a good thing most of the time, and because it's supposed to stop real bad things from happening. Sometimes that isn't always the case, but there's at least 3 checks and balances before something can become law or a budget can be passed.
It's not uncommon, but would you say that there's any even just like characteristic differences between the two bodies? I mean,
We're better looking.
And we can count to 29.
Some of us can count to 15.
President, how does it compare this year to previous years, though? It seems like that you started with a lot of varying issues that you all agreed you had to deal with. You all had plans on how to deal with them. You all seem to be headed towards some kind of compromise, and yet here we are with just 2 days left and no compromise on any of these issues, really, that's been through both bodies at this point.
I think the only other year that we had as many big issues was the year we did tax reform and soccer stadiums and other issues that were that year. That was a big issue year. We had a lot of money that year also, so there's some real correlations with that 2007 legislative session.
But how would you compare it, though, to the relationship that you have with the House? I mean, there seems to be a lot of frustration over here. For example, you don't have a Utah Cares bill to hold a hearing and to move forward.
We have I believe we continue to have a great relationship with the House. And we want to keep an open mind and an open door with issues. We have things that we want to insist on, and we do that in our way. But other than a couple of issues, I think we're going to come to some agreement on a lot of those things.
Let me add this to you. So I think this has been the best budget year we've had of working together to come to solutions. I really appreciate Representative Sanpei. I think he's brought a perspective that's been very helpful. We've worked very well together. And I think the leadership team, the budget, we did the budget differently this year than we had before, but I think there was less real animosity. I think there are obviously areas we disagree on, but I think we've been able to do that quite well.
Some people would
That's
say
true.
there would seem to be less animosity, though, because there's been so much focus this session on the fight over health in Utah, and the House coming up with a plan and now not sending it over to the Senate. Do you think that's had something to do with the smoothness, maybe, of say, the budget process?
I don't really know, but I do know this has been one of the best budget years to work together to come to solutions. I think the governor was basically pleased. Obviously, there's some things he'd like to change in it, but when you do a budget that big and all encompassing, to have so little disagreement with what we did and back and forth between the bodies, I think it's remarkable, especially when every legislator serves on an appropriation committee. So everybody's had some say about what's going on.
Senator, I want to ask about the WPU. There are a lot of people here last night who are just not pleased with the agreement that you have reached with the House, that 4% increase. They'd like to see it higher. I'm wondering if you want to respond to that.
You know, it's really interesting because when the session started, I'm going back by memory now, I think the state office asked for 2.5 increase in WPU. There's other agencies who didn't, and we even heard, I think, the UEA asked for 4%. How the governor got to 6.25%, he had to take $94 million out of the highway fund. And it's kind of strange to take money out of the highway fund, at the same time want to raise gas taxes. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me in that regard. So we, looking at that, felt like the commitment to the roads, and they're all heavy commitments, every one of them, that we could stretch and bring that up to 4% WPU and not take the 94 million. Had we taken the 94 million out, that would have given you roughly 3.5% WPU to do that, but we would have paid the price, not this year, but next year in the projections of road construction. So I think it all goes together. I understand their dissent. I'm sure had we given them 6.25, we would have had requests for 7, 8. I mean, it's just the nature of the thing. But I think in light of the financial pressure we were under and what we were able to do and not do in taking money away from the roads that need it so badly, we've even talked about the gas tax, I think we came out very well.
The governor's argument to that is that there's a more urgent need in education today and that we can deal with the roads down the road, so to speak. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think that all of them we need to balance together. We could take more money out of the roads. We could close down all sorts of state agencies and put all that money into education. But I think based this year on the fact that they won't lose money on retirement they've had for the last 5 years, but they really should have a nice salary increase at 4% and still not damage the other programs. It became very obvious, I think, to most legislators when they said, well, if we do the governor's program and we do take the money out that's planned for long-term planning, I think every legislator could see very needed roads in their areas that wouldn't be built. And then as soon as we do that, then the criticism is, well, you're not thinking ahead and planning roads.
Senator Adams,
I think the word is
Since-
balance.
since you were getting ready to leave, I wanted to ask about SB 296. Is it going to make it out of House Committee today?
That's I've heard the House was going to move it out. It probably needs to today to move through. I had a good hearing yesterday. I think the effort's trying to make sure that we give as much time for public input as we can. So my hope is it does.
Do you think yesterday there were any stall tactics involved with the bill? Did you get that sense?
Oh, I don't think it makes any difference whether it came out yesterday or today, where then it's not going to get on the board any faster one way or the other, so I'm not sure if there were stall tactics, what the purpose of it was, so I don't think so.
Any plans for an amendment or anything like that? Any concerns that they might try to do that?
We're trying to hold it intact. I think it's been a very a delicate negotiation, and I think there's balance on both sides, and I would sure resist any type of amendment.
Have you been given any indication that an amendment might be coming?
No, so if there is, please let me know. You guys can hear about it before I do. So I haven't.
You think it's
already talked healthy Utah before I came in. We could do that in practice separately.
We had some talk about it, and happy to have conversations with you.
Well, maybe Senator Shiazawa wants to weigh in on that. I mean, you were the one that's got a bill passed in the Senate. Wasn't it easy? You saw it fail in the House committee, and now there's an alternative in the House, but you haven't seen that. How do you feel at this point, given the amount of work you put into getting this done?
Well, on the one hand, I'm just real gratified with my Senate colleagues. We took a tough issue. We looked at the issue clearly. We decided to go forth with this. This is the best plan. It still is the best plan on the table. The fact that the House didn't agree with it or didn't actually get the full vote on this particular issue is up to them and how they choose to do this. And we're open. If they want to submit over Utah Cares, we'll deal with that. We're open to that. And personally, I'd like to have the opportunity to look at that. That's an option. And if we had to adapt it, substitute it, or do whatever, we would do so. We do it so cooperatively with the House, but I'd still like to have this conversation go on. We're still open over here.
You've said all along that the worst thing that could happen for this population is to do nothing. Are you afraid we're approaching that?
We definitely have that possibility looming. And with that, if this in fact does stall and we can't move forward with this, then we have to look at this summer, this fall, and taking some further action at that time. And again, we'll have to work with our House colleagues on that, since we both have to be in agreement on something.
You've got, both sides have spent a lot of time on this issue though. Is it to the point where there's just no coming together? And would we see the same thing play out in a special session?
First of all, you're right. The House has spent a lot of time on Utah Cares. And I'm sure they have their reasons for that. But I wouldn't give up hope on that. And if we have to go to special session, if we have to go to interim, I think there's good minds over in the House that'd be willing to look at this, look at the options, and continue negotiation both with CMS as well as between the two bodies. I wouldn't give up on this. What bothers me, though, is extending the timeline. Again, we go months without action on this for on behalf of the citizens here. And I hate to have them suffer and not have something happen in that interim.
But there's always two sides to this story, and so we're trying to seek first to understand, then to be understood.
But you don't even have an opportunity to talk about their plan over here until they send the bill over.
Yeah, we do. We know what the bill is. It's online, and so we can look at it.
Have you talked about it in your caucus meetings yet?
We have.
Is there a consensus from the...
There isn't. No.
There is a consensus behind Senator Shields-Ellis.
Yes.
Senator Hilliard, am I correct that you guys funded criminal justice reforms HB 348 last night?
You know, I haven't seen the bill itself, but we have put money aside to fund that.
Okay, so you've got money earmarked for that.
Is that 9
Budgeted.
Senator's at 9 million?
Yeah, I'm going by memory. I need my sheet. I only have about 550, but I think it was nine, just under the requested amount as we put the budget together. And then there was, I think, 4 million or 3 million in the treatment portion of it.
Any other questions? We have a question, 2 questions.
2. The first one, will SB 117 interventions for students with dyslexia get funded?
I can tell you it hasn't been funded yet because it's a fiscal note bill. We're now in the process of going through those fiscal note bills to decide how much money we have, how many issues there are, and what the priority. I personally support the program. I think it's a very important one. I've met the families involved, and I think the program makes sense. But that'll be a decision made by the caucus as we look how much money we have and how we allocate it.
Second question. The medical cannabis bill lost on a very close vote. For those in the room that did not vote in favor of the bill, why not? And what would you need in such a bill to vote for it? Would like to hear from several nay voters, please. Thank you for your answers.
Okay, well, I was one of the nay voters, actually the last nay voter. And I just struggle with growing cannabis in Utah. I think it's going to be that's a big change for Utah to actually have the plant being grown here. How are you going to control it? There's a lot of unanswered questions regarding that issue and how this would be distributed, and do so in a regulated way, so this doesn't become recreational use of marijuana. And I applaud Senator Madsen for taking on a big issue. It's not over. We'll be probably coming back with he'll be coming back next year with a more refined bill, something that's been worked on, and it's answering a lot of those questions like Senator Vickers had. He's a pharmacist. It'd be great to have him in here to address some of those. But my main issue was just growing marijuana here. I think there's a way to get those, that you can get cannabis in different forms here without having to grow it, or it's just, I think it's a regulation nightmare to try and control all that.
Senator Shizawa, you were also a nay vote last night on the issue, and you cited some concerns about professional colleagues not having sufficient time to weigh in on the topic. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Certainly. I think in concept, I'm probably more supportive of medical cannabis as a treatment for, say, intractable nausea, specifically in, say, cancer patients. And I'd welcome a dialogue on other indications like patients with chronic pain syndrome, ALS, multiple sclerosis, and other serious wasting conditions. But when you address such a big bill like this, and they specifically name a number of specialists that would be those very providers who would be responsible and liable for writing these prescriptions, they should be part of this dialogue from really day one. And that hadn't happened. And so before we can commit these very physicians into doing this and accepting that responsibility about patients about whom not only do they have the responsibility, but about whom they care, they ought to be engaged. And that was my principal objection in that way, was just the way that it was handled or wasn't handled.
I don't want to tee it up so you can take a whack at Senator Madsen, but I think I'm going to do that anyway. You mentioned problems with the process. I think Senator Weiler during the debate said, DPS is given the task of doing this regulatory regime, and they were not consulted with. DOFL wasn't consulted with, and they're going to be doing the licensing. The bill came out, I think, in the 4th week of the session, 5th week of the session. Was this just a failure to do the legwork, do the spade work up front?
I can't comment on his process. He mentioned, for example, in the session that he used 2 priority bills in order to get this forth. So I think his effort was sincere. He tackled a huge issue, and by the way, it's still illegal. And so trying to blend all of these issues of medical providers, a whole new treatment regimen, and then all of the regulatory issues here was a huge bite. And I only am commenting on the very narrow part, which is huge, of the medical aspects. So I can't be critical of what he was doing. I probably wouldn't have done that the same way, simply because I look at it from maybe the physician and provider side, whereas he might look at it more as a citizen and more of a consumer side. So I think we would differ in our approaches simply because we come from different aspects.
Senator Muir, how's your thought on that?
Senator Knudsen, you flipped your vote too. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I voted for it several days ago because I have a close acquaintance who has a child who suffers with brain tumor and a lot of epileptic seizures that she experiences on a daily basis. They have been using cannabis, and it seems to be very effective for her. That isn't the case in all cases, I suspect. But I voted aye the first time, mainly because of her. In the interim, till last night, I've been thinking about many of the things that Dr. Shizawa has pointed out, and they were enlightened with some of the, much of what Senator Vickers had to say about it. And I thought, there's no rush. If this is going to be good medical practice, then that will be revealed as we go forward and try to get a handle on it. You know, the governor of Colorado advised Utah, don't be in a hurry. And let's not overlook the fact that you've got plenty of time to make that decision. And I basically came down to that point last night and chose to vote no. And I felt that was the right thing to do.
President Niederhauser, I think it was you that just mentioned the fact that it's still illegal federally.
That was Senator Shizawa.
Oh, okay. Well, this can be for whoever wants to answer it, but there was actually a bill introduced on the federal level today that would actually crack down on the Fed's ability to take action on state legal medical marijuana. My question is, if there were action taken on the federal level, would that make the decision easier on the state level?
Yes. If they're going to start cracking down on states like Colorado and Washington, I think that has a big impact on whether we move ahead with it.
Well, the bill would actually do the opposite. It would take the federal government's ability to crack down.
Oh, okay. Well,
the way it's presented.
Well, I think it would have some. I think that would help some people with that. But it's only one question that I have, and I think it's only one question a lot of people have. Just the federal conflict in the law. I'm concerned about the actual growing, how that's regulated, how we deal with that and deal with that in an appropriate way, how it's distributed. There's just a lot of questions still on how that would happen, and are we doing the right thing, doing it the right way?
If the federal prohibition is removed, it would pretty much address the concerns that Commissioner Valentine had about no safe harbor for the business aspects of this whole question. So would that seem to ameliorate the concerns,
about that question?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Let me give a different
there would be a fiscal note or a constitutional note on the bill.
I've always been opposed to it because I've traveled and gone to other states and talked to other legislators at conferences. Those who have been involved in marijuana have said be very careful, because there's so much money behind it, that once you start, however, opening, make sure you know where you're going with it, or you'll be swept away. And so my concern, as I listened to it, is reminding me what other states have said. If you're going to move out in that area, make sure you know where you're stepping so that you can control where it goes. I'm sure there's not a person here that wouldn't say it's a tragedy we have alcoholics, the tragedy we have youth drinking alcohol and driving, and those types of things. Well, alcohol itself, some people enjoy it at dinner, and it's not illegal, but how it's used, and I think that's a concern. Once you open this up to marijuana, so I'm told by people in other states, you can't always foresee the consequences you're going to have unless you measure once, or measure twice and cut once. And that was my concern. I felt like it hadn't gone through that process.
We have Senator Main here today. She passed out her municipal township bill yesterday. Do you want to brief us on that?
Yes, I do. We've talked about health care, we've talked about transportation, marijuana. Now we're going to talk about governance. It might not be as interesting, but it's significant. We passed SB 199, and this piece of legislation will change the whole way we govern Salt Lake County. We're going to have an election. If it passes in the House at the end of the year, the townships will choose if there'll be a metro township or a city, and they'll have the opportunity to vote to see if they go into a service district. We're going to change everything. The financial stability at Salt Lake County is in our journey. We need to make sure financially we know where we're going. We're going to give the townships choice, and we're going to give the east side that has had issues with the islands, we're going to give them the ability to make a city or not, and then we're going to hold those townships true. So it's changing the whole way we govern in Salt Lake County. And it's my colleagues, thank you very much. They passed it out last night, and it's in the House.
Does every community have to make a decision?
Only the township, that unincorporated, the townships.
Right, but I mean, are we talking about doing away with any part of unincorporated Salt Lake County then?
They will all go to the vote in November, and those that are unincorporated, they will have the choice that they can annex, they can, like Kearns and Magna, they'll all have the vote. And what we'll do is to make sure they're locked in. If they want to be a township, they'll be a township. And they won't be gobbled up, and this fighting between the east and the west, and who puts in more taxpayers' dollars, it'll be gone.
So they have to decide whether they're either going to annex or unincorporate.
Yes, and they
but
vote.
There will be no, after November, there will be no unincorporated, like you won't have your Mill Creek, you won't have your
The choices will be theirs, and they will have the choices. Do they want to be a city or a metro township? We thought that was kind of a nice name. We can give it another name, and then they have the choice of being in a special district where all the services are, and they can opt in or they can opt out. What we've given them, this is your choice. And after the choice is made, then we'll hold true. The townships, most of them cannot support themselves. They don't have their lovely communities with long roots, and they like who they are. And so we're going to make sure that they're whole and they're not gobbled up by someone. And those that choose to go another way, the option will be theirs. So I ask you to look for SB 199. And
third substitute.
Thank you.
Is it just because they're financially not sustainable as unincorporated townships? Is the county having to bear too much of a burden?
What we want to do is, this has been decades of issue, and so what we want to do is to make sure this is what we're going to do. So there's financial stability. Salt Lake County, in any governance, they look years down the line. And so we want to make sure that Salt Lake County can do that, finance things long-term, have the stability. We're giving Utahns the choice where they want to be. And when they've chosen, then they'll make sure they're solidified, and they'll have options, and they'll have governance of themselves, zoning, all those kind of things. Everybody likes ownerships, and we're going to give ownership to the townships, those that choose to be there.
Can some financially even afford to incorporate though? I mean, you're building a government from scratch at that point.
Well, there's going to be, there'll be studies, those kind of fiscal things will be, there is a portion of that where there's financial studies and responsibilities and those things. If they choose to make that direction, the bill gives them direction to do that. But the vote at the end of the year will be for what do you want to do, where do you want to go, and who do you want to be.
This is a movement that the county's been working on for years. They've shed themselves so that their municipal services and created some autonomy for those. And so this is most of what's happening in this being taken place or is in process. We're going to have unified fire, unified police. They're contracting with cities. This is just really creating a county city for what is in the townships at this point. And it doesn't protect all the little teeny islands from annexation, because the reality is eventually they're going to need to just incorporate, or not incorporate, but to be annexed in. It's an issue of municipal services delivery, and cities were set up to do that. Counties were not set up to do that, and this is now 40-year process in the making, and we're coming to some pretty good conclusions, I think, here at the end of the day.
I agree. The good president is right. This is 40 years, and we need to. It's been a journey, and I've been involved with it the last 7 years. This is the third piece of legislation dealing with townships, and we have an end. And we had a bill last year to form a council. So who has made the decisions on that are the townships, all those people involved. And so this is their decision, this is their answer, so we need to go forward.
What's your response to Senator Thatcher's attempt to substitute the bill and his claim on the hardship that it will create for people in his district, and specifically the Magna Council's unanimous opposition to it that he claims?
I think the senator was misguided. I think that the Magna people were involved, and maybe those people he was interacting with maybe weren't as involved as much as they needed to be, but Magna was there. I was raised in a township, I govern a township, and the sponsor in the House lives in a township. So, I mean, we know the journey there, but Magna was involved 100%.
If we could switch topics for just a second, there's a new poll, UtahPolicy.com poll, showing that the governor, when the governor has conflict with the legislature, most Utahns tend to agree more with the governor than with lawmakers. 48% would agree with the governor in the case of a disagreement, and 21% with the legislature. Do you feel like maybe the Senate is taking a hit for what's happening over in the House? Because it doesn't specify Healthy Utah, but clearly, I mean, that's been a source of conflict, the session between the governor and the House, not the Senate, but yet.
But if it isn't Healthy Utah, it's some other issue every year. And I think it's just natural for people to look to more of an executive and instead of the legislature, because you got 104 people rushing around trying to deal with policy. It's a lot easier for the governor than it is for the legislature. And so I'm not surprised by that poll, but I think if you polled it almost any given year, you would see it be pretty close to the same, maybe intensified this year a little bit by Healthy Utah.
I think if you personalized it, if you went from Senator Knutson's district and had a different he versus the governor, you'd probably have a far better rate, because most people look at the legislatures, who are those people out there, but I know my legislator, and I like him, and he or she, and they're doing well.
They all look the same as what Bagley draws us up to look like.
So you don't feel like maybe the House has put you in a bad spot in terms of how you're perceived?
I don't interpret that poll that way. No. All right, we'll take any other questions afterwards, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hey.